When my husband's first wife walked into my 60th birthday party, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw her out. Instead, I smiled, walked to the back room, and returned with a gift wrapped in silver paper. Everyone went silent. My husband's face turned white as snow. His hand started shaking. But I kept smiling. Because after 20 years of marriage, I had finally learned the truth. And the truth didn't break me. It set me free. That gift I handed him wasn't just a present. It was the end of a lie. The end of pretending. And the beginning of something I should have done a long time ago. My name is Caroline. I'm 60 years old. And this is the story of how I discovered that the man I loved had been lying to me since the day we met. I met Richard when I was 38 years old. I was working as a librarian in a small town in Vermont. It was autumn. The leaves were golden and red. And the air smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. Richard came into the library one Tuesday afternoon, looking for a book about old farmhouses. He wore a brown sweater and wire-rimmed glasses. He had kind eyes. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. But it felt important. He came back the next week. And the week after that. By November, we were having coffee together every Saturday morning at the cafe on Main Street. He told me he was a carpenter. That he'd moved to Vermont 2 years ago from Connecticut. That he loved the quiet. That he'd been alone for a long time and was ready to start over. He never mentioned a wife. He never mentioned a past that included anyone else. And I never asked. We got married the following spring. It was a small ceremony. Just us two friends and a justice of the peace. I wore a cream-colored dress and carried wildflowers. Richard held my hand the entire time. He looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. I believed him. I believed everything. We built a life together. A simple life. We bought a little house with blue shutters and a porch that wrapped around the front. Richard built us a garden bed. And I planted tomatoes and basil. We didn't have children. I couldn't. And Richard said it didn't matter. He said I was enough. Every morning he made me coffee. Every night we sat on the porch and watched the sun go down. For 20 years that was our rhythm. 20 years of steady, quiet love. But there were small things. Little moments I ignored. Sometimes Richard would get a phone call and step outside to answer it. He'd say it was work. A client. Nothing important. Sometimes a letter would come in the mail with no return address. And he'd open it in the garage alone. Once I asked him about it. He said it was paperwork from an old job. I didn't push. I trusted him. I always trusted him. The cracks started to show about 6 months before my 60th birthday. Small cracks. The kind you don't notice until they've already spread too far. It began with a name. We were at the grocery store picking out apples. An older woman walked past us in the produce aisle. She stopped, stared at Richard. Then she said, "Richard? Richard Hayes? Is that really you?" Her voice was surprised, almost shocked. Richard's whole body went stiff. He didn't smile. He didn't move. He just nodded once and said, "Hello, Margaret." The woman looked at me, then back at him. Her face changed, like she knew something I didn't. "I didn't know you were still in the area," she said quietly. "I thought after everything with—" She stopped herself, glanced at me again. "Well, it's good to see you." Then she walked away. I asked Richard who she was. He said she was someone from a long time ago. A neighbor from Connecticut. Someone he barely remembered. But his hands were shaking when he pushed the cart. And he didn't talk the whole drive home. I told myself it was nothing. People have passed. Everyone has people they'd rather not run into. I let it go. But then it happened again. A month later, we were at a diner 2 towns over. Richard went to the restroom, and the waitress came to refill my coffee. She was older, maybe in her 70s. She looked at our table, at Richard's jacket on the chair, and said, "Is that Richard Hayes you're with?" I said yes. She shook her head slowly. "I haven't seen him in years. Not since his wife." She stopped, looked at me more carefully. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else." My heart dropped. "His wife," I said. She blinked. "I just meant, I'm sorry, Han. I must be confused." But she wasn't confused. I saw it in her eyes. She knew something. And she thought I knew it too. When Richard came back, I didn't say anything. I watched him eat his eggs and toast like nothing had happened. I watched him smile at me across the table. And I felt something cold settle in my chest, a feeling I'd never had before. Doubt. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Richard in the dark, listening to him breathe. And I thought about all the times he'd left the room to take a call, all the letters with no return address, all the moments when he'd seem far away, like he was thinking about something he couldn't tell me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things. But deep down I knew something was wrong. A week later I did something I'd never done before. I went through his things. I waited until he went to the hardware store. Then I went into the garage, where he kept his toolbox and old files. I felt guilty. My hands were shaking. But I kept going. In the bottom drawer of an old filing cabinet, I found a folder. Inside were papers, legal documents. And at the top of one of them I saw a name, Evelyn Hayes. It was a marriage certificate. Richard's name was on it. And hers. Dated 35 years ago. I sat on the cold garage floor and stared at that paper. My chest felt tight. My hands went numb. Richard had been married before. And he'd never told me. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that there was no divorce decree. No paperwork ending the marriage. Just hospital records, bills, and a note in Richard's handwriting that said, Long-term care facility, Bright Meadows, New Hampshire. Evelyn wasn't dead. She was alive. And Richard had been visiting her. For 20 years. I didn't confront him right away. I couldn't. My whole body felt numb. Like I was underwater and couldn't hear anything clearly. I put the folder back exactly where I found it. I walked back into the house. I washed my hands. I made dinner. And when Richard came home, I smiled at him like I always did. But inside I was breaking. That night, I lay awake next to him and thought about everything. Our wedding day. The vows he made. The way he looked at me and said I was enough. And I realized that maybe I wasn't. Maybe I had never been. Maybe I was just the woman who filled the space while his real wife was somewhere else. Alive. Waiting. I needed to know more. The next morning after Richard left for work, I got in my car and drove 2 hours to New Hampshire. To Bright Meadows. It was a care facility tucked into the hills, surrounded by pine trees and quiet. The kind of place where people go when they can't take care of themselves anymore. I walked inside. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might faint. At the front desk, I asked if Evelyn Hayes was a resident there. The woman looked at me kindly and nodded. She said Evelyn had been there for 23 years. That she had early-onset Alzheimer's. That her husband visited her every month. That he was a good man. A devoted man. I felt sick. I asked if I could see her. The woman hesitated. Then she said yes. She led me down a long hallway that smelled like lavender and soap. At the end she opened a door. And there she was. Evelyn. She was sitting in a chair by the window looking out at the trees. She had white hair, soft and thin. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked fragile. Small. Like a bird. She didn't turn when I came in. She just stared outside, humming a tune I didn't recognize. I stood there frozen. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know why I'd come. Maybe I wanted to see her. To make her real. To understand. The nurse spoke gently. Evelyn, you have a visitor. Evelyn didn't respond. She just kept humming. I took a step closer. Hello, Evelyn, I said softly. My name is Caroline. She turned her head slowly. Her eyes were pale blue. Empty. She looked at me like I was a stranger. 'Cause I was. Do you know Richard? I asked. At the sound of his name, something flickered in her face. Just for a second. She smiled. A small, distant smile. Richard, she whispered. He's my husband. My throat tightened. I nodded. Yes. He is. She looked back out the window. He comes to see me, she said. Every month. He brings me flowers. Yellow ones. I like yellow. I felt tears burn my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I stayed for 10 more minutes. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see if she'd say anything else. But she didn't. She just sat there, humming and staring at the trees. I thanked the nurse and left. On the drive home I cried. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood. Richard hadn't lied to hurt me. He'd lied to protect me. to protect himself, to protect a life he couldn't let go of and a life he wanted to build at the same time. He loved her. He'd never stopped, and I had been living in the shadow of that love for 20 years without even knowing it. When I got home, Richard was in the kitchen making soup. He smiled when he saw me. "Where've you been?" he asked. "Just out," I said. "Errands." He kissed my forehead, and I let him. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I was going to wait. I was going to see what he would do. If he would ever tell me the truth. And if he didn't, I would decide what that meant. For me. For us. 3 weeks later, my 60th birthday arrived. Richard insisted we have a party. Nothing big. Just some neighbors, a few friends from town, cake and wine on the back porch. I didn't want it. But I said yes. I smiled and nodded and let him plan it. The day of the party, I woke up early. I felt calm. Strangely calm. Like I'd already made peace with whatever was going to happen. I put on a blue dress. I did my hair. I even put on lipstick. Richard told me I looked beautiful. People started arriving around for. There was laughter. Music. The smell of grilled chicken and fresh bread. I stood by the porch railing holding a glass of lemonade, watching Richard talk to our neighbor Tom. He looked happy. Relaxed. Like everything was perfect. And then the door opened. And she walked in. Evelyn. She was wearing a yellow cardigan and a long skirt. Her white hair was brushed neatly. She looked confused. Lost. But she was there. In my house. At my birthday party. Behind her was a younger woman. Maybe in her 40s. She had Evelyn's eyes. She put a hand on Evelyn's shoulder and said, "Mom, are you sure this is the right place?" That's when I realized. Evelyn had a daughter. And she'd brought her mother here. To see Richard. The room went silent. Everyone turned. Richard's face drained of all color. He stood frozen, holding a plate of food. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Evelyn looked around the room. And then she saw him. "Richard," she said softly. She smiled. That same distant smile. I didn't move. I just watched. Watched as Richard's hands started shaking. Watched as his eyes filled with panic. Watched as 20 years of lies crumbled in front of everyone we knew. And then I did something no one expected. I smiled. I walked calmly to the back room. I opened the closet. And I pulled out a box I'd wrapped 3 days ago. Silver paper. White ribbon. Inside was everything. The marriage certificate. The hospital bills. The folder. All of it. I walked back into the room. Everyone was still staring. Evelyn's daughter looked horrified. Richard looked like he might collapse. I handed him the box. "Happy anniversary, Richard," I said quietly. 35 years. That's a long time to be married. He stared at the box. His hands trembled as he took it. I turned to Evelyn. I took her hand gently. "He's been a good husband to you," I said. "He never forgot." Then I looked at Richard one last time. But he forgot about me. And I walked out. I didn't go far. I walked down the porch steps across the yard and sat on the wooden bench under the oak tree. The same bench Richard had built for me 10 years ago. The same bench where we'd sat together on summer evenings, side by side, watching fireflies. I could still hear the voices from inside the house. Muffled. Confused. Someone was crying. I think it was Richard. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, feeling the cool evening air on my skin and waited. After a few minutes I heard footsteps. I thought it might be Richard. But it wasn't. It was Evelyn's daughter. She stood a few feet away, wringing her hands. She looked young and tired and guilty all at once. "I'm so sorry," she said. Her voice cracked. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about you." I looked up at her. "What's your name?" "Claire," she said quietly. "Sit down, Claire." She hesitated, then sat beside me on the bench. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "My mom's been in that facility since I was 19. My dad, Richard, he visited her every month. Like clockwork. He never missed. He paid for everything. Her care, her room, everything. I always thought he was just devoted. That he was this incredible man who refused to give up on her." "He is devoted," I said softly. "Just not to me." Claire's eyes filled with tears. I found an old envelope last week. It had your address on it. And a note that said, Caroline's 60th, don't forget. I didn't understand. So I asked my mom's nurse. She told me Richard was remarried, that he had another life. I didn't believe it. So I brought my mom here. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I'd misunderstood. You didn't misunderstand, I said. She wiped her eyes. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have come. I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to know who you were. I turned to look at her. And now you know. I'm the woman who didn't know she was living a lie. Claire shook her head. I don't think he meant to hurt you. I think he just didn't know how to let go. I nodded slowly. I know, but that doesn't make it right. We sat in silence for a while. Then Claire stood up. I should take my mom home. She's confused. This was too much for her. Wait, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. I'd written it that morning. Before the party. Before everything fell apart. I handed it to her. Give this to Richard. When you see him. Claire took the note. She didn't open it. She just nodded. Then she walked back toward the house. I stayed on the bench. A few minutes later, I saw Claire guiding Evelyn down the porch steps. Evelyn looked calm, peaceful, like none of this had touched her. I envied that. I envied her for not having to carry the weight of the truth. Richard came out after them. He stood on the porch watching them leave. Then he turned and saw me. He started walking toward me, slow and unsteady, like his legs might give out. He stopped a few feet away. His face was red. His eyes were swollen. Caroline, he said. His voice broke. Please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said calmly. You were married. You still are. She got sick. You put her in a home. And then you met me. And you decided you could have both. A wife you visited once a month. And a wife you came home to every night. It wasn't like that, he said desperately. I didn't plan this. I didn't mean to fall in love with you. But I did. And I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if you knew you'd leave. And I couldn't lose you. I couldn't lose both of you. I stood up. I looked him in the eyes. You didn't lose both of us, Richard. You lost me. You lost me the moment you decided I didn't deserve the truth. Caroline, please. I gave you 20 years, I said, and my voice finally cracked. 20 years of my life. I trusted you. I loved you. I built a home with you. And the whole time you were carrying her in your heart. The whole time I was second. You were never second, he said, tears streaming down his face. I loved you. I still love you. But you loved her first, I said. And you never stopped. And that's the part you don't understand, Richard. I deserve to be first. I deserve to be the only one. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. I'm leaving, I said. Where will you go? I don't know. My sister's maybe. A hotel. Somewhere that isn't here. This is your home, he said. I shook my head. No, this was our home. But it was built on a lie. And I can't live in it anymore. I walked past him back toward the house. The guests were gone. The porch was empty. I went inside, grabbed my purse and my coat, and walked out the front door. Richard stood in the yard watching me. He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, broken and silent. I got in my car. I started the engine. And I drove away. I didn't look back. I stayed with my sister Margaret for 2 weeks. She lived in Maine in a little cottage by the sea. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of waves crashing against the rocks. Every evening I sat on her porch with a cup of tea and watched the sun sink into the water. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time in 20 years I felt like I could breathe. Margaret didn't ask too many questions. She just let me be. She cooked for me. She sat with me. And when I finally told her everything, she didn't say I should forgive him. She didn't say I should go back. She just held my hand and said, "You deserve better, Caroline. You always did." Richard called me every day. I didn't answer. He left voicemails. Long ones. His voice was broken and desperate. He said he was sorry. That he'd made a terrible mistake. That he'd tell me everything if I'd just come home. But I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I ever would be. One afternoon, I went for a walk along the beach. The wind was strong and the sky was gray. I found a smooth stone near the water and held it in my hand. It was cold and solid, real. I thought about Richard, about Evelyn, about the life I thought I had. And I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just sad. Sad for all of us. For Evelyn, who lost herself to a disease she couldn't control. For Richard, who loved two women and couldn't be honest with either of them. And for me, who gave my heart to a man who couldn't give me all of his. But I also realized something else. I was 60 years old. I was still here, still breathing, still whole. And I had a choice. I could spend the rest of my life being bitter. Or I could let go. Not forgive, maybe, but let go. On my last night in Maine, I finally opened the note I'd written for Richard. The one I'd given to Claire. I kept a copy for myself. It said, "Richard, I don't hate you. I don't even blame you. I just can't be with you anymore. You gave Evelyn your past. You gave me your present. But neither of us ever had all of you. And I've spent too many years settling for half a life. I hope you find peace. I hope Evelyn knows, somewhere in her heart, that you never left her. And I hope one day you'll understand why I had to leave you. Take care of yourself. Caroline." I folded the note and put it back in my pocket. Then I went inside and told Margaret I was ready to go home. Not to Richard's house, but to my own life. Whatever that would look like now. I moved into a small apartment in town. It had big windows and wood floors and a little balcony where I could see the mountains. I got a part-time job at the library again. I started painting, something I hadn't done since I was young. I made new friends. I joined a book club. I lived. Richard sent me letters. I read some of them. In one, he told me that Evelyn had passed away quietly in her sleep, 6 months after my birthday. He said he'd been with her, that she'd smiled at him one last time like she knew him. He said he wished I could have known her, that I would have liked her. Maybe I would have. Maybe in another life we could have been friends. But not in this one. Richard asked if we could talk, if we could try again. But I said no. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together. And that's okay. Not every story gets a happy ending. But every story gets an ending. And sometimes that's enough. I'm 61 now. I live alone. I have my own routines. My own quiet joys. And I've learned something important. Love isn't just about holding on. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go. I don't regret the 20 years I spent with Richard. They weren't all a lie. There were real moments. Real love. But they weren't the whole truth. And I deserve the whole truth. We all do. So if you're reading this or listening to this, and you're living in the shadow of someone else's secret, I want you to know something. You are not second. You are not half. You are whole. And you deserve to be loved completely. Honestly. Without hidden rooms or hidden lives. It's never too late to walk away. It's never too late to start again. My name is Caroline. I'm 61 years old. And this is the story of how I learned to choose myself.